episode number 45.
When I had my near-death experiences, I didn't exit consciousness. I entered consciousness of a different form.
The last 5 days of my mom's life, we'd have Ringo jump onto the bed, and he would nestle to her, and I know she could feel him. We'd actually place her hand on his fur.
You know, you learn about cultures and you learn about people, and especially talking to the older generation, you learn about what it was like for them 60, 70 years ago, and that's just an eye-opening experience that I don't know where I would have found that if I wasn't in the milk truck.
Why didn't Yoko step in and say this isn't what he wanted?
Well, she did it.
She's the one who had him cremated.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Oh, Yoko.
Yeah, I'm not going to eat anything. I'm going to stay as vague as possible.
Okay,
so.
good. Let me know if you hear a drone over your house.
Hey everybody, I'm Brant Huddleston, host of Dance Past Sunset, where I explore ways boomers and their aging parents can enjoy peak life experiences, living and traveling independently using the tools, tips, and technologies presented by the guests on my show. Today's episode is the third and final featuring people I met at the annual conference of the Coalition to Transform Advanced Care, or CTAC. Now, the guests featured on these three shows all share CTAC's vision to help Americans with advanced illness, especially the most vulnerable among us, to get comprehensive, high-quality, family-centered care where and when they need it, and in a way that honors their dignity. That makes all the people working toward that vision heroes in my mind, and I'm fortunate to have had a few join me on the show. One of the guests you'll hear from today is well known among those of us who work to reclaim death and dying as a natural human experience instead of primarily a clinical medical one. His name is B.J. Miller. I knew of B.J. from his inspiring work as a palliative care doctor with the Zen Hospice Center and from his TED Talk. So when I had a chance to meet him in person at CTAC, well, it was just an incredible honor, like meeting a rock star for me. When you hear him speak, I think you'll know why. But first, let's drop in on a fun conversation I was having with another guest from the CTAC conference, Amber Slichta, from the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation. Now, if you don't know of Ralph Wilson, he is best known as the founder and 54-year owner of the Buffalo Bills football team. And upon his passing, he left a small fortune, check that, a huge fortune, $1.2 billion and counting to be exact, that by his direction is to be granted out to the last penny by the year 2035. It's part of Amber's job to ensure those investments are done wisely and in accordance with Mr. Wilson's wishes, which are clearly stated on the Foundation's website. But let me give you a hint. If you are working in the field of caregiving or livable communities in Western New York or Southeastern Michigan, then you're going to want to pay attention. One last thing before we start with Amber. If you are with People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, I want you to know I was just kidding about barbecuing a pug. I meant to say barbecuing a pig. All kidding aside, please join me for a short conversation with Amber Slichta from the Ralph C. Wilson Foundation.
Caregiving is a system, and a family does it as a unit, and it's all part of their day-to-day life experience. And in one case, there was a husband and a wife, and the husband was the caregiver for the wife. And one of the ways that he kept his stress level down is he was able to sleep very well at night because they had a pet cat. And when his wife needed something or is in distress during the night, the cat would go and wake him up and he could attend to her. And he was able to sleep well because the cat reliably did its job.
Like a cat alarm.
Yes.
So how did you get to be, I guess you're like a program director, is that right?
Yeah, I'm a vice president of programs.
Okay. So how did you become the vice? What's your personal story? How did you get from where you were to where you are now?
Sure. It's actually, in a way, a really quick story. I was working at a different foundation in upstate New York and was at a point in my career where I was trying to decide, do I want to stay there? The existing president was retiring, so that was an option. I had been looking at some president positions at other foundations, and I kept circling back to the Ralph Wilson Foundation and procrastinated a little and sent an email to one of the few staff that were there at the time and said, is that position still available? She called me back right away and said, well, are you asking for yourself or someone else? And I said, well, I'm asking for myself. And the next morning, I left a conference, flew to Detroit, had spent 4 hours at doing what I was pretty sure were job interviews, got sent. I went back to the airport, landed, and had a job offer on my voicemail.
Lucky you.
Yep, quickest job I ever got and best job I've ever had so far.
Are you having fun?
Absolutely.
What have you learned here at CTAC that surprised you?
I think what surprised, the best surprise that I had, and it was a very good surprise, it was really a lot of conversation around caregivers, and I know this is a conference about advanced illness, but understanding that caregivers don't exist in a vacuum or in a one-on-one relationship, that they do things, in the culture, in the context of a family, and in their own lives. And there seems to be some movement towards understanding that if you have an advanced illness or you are a caregiver, it's not all about the health system. And there seems to be a little bit of a shift towards the health system better engaging with families rather than trying to pull the family or the person with an advanced illness into their system, and kind of missing that they come with a life and a family.
And that was hinted at this morning by one of the panelists who's, I believe it was the gentleman from Aetna, who said that healthcare is really only kind of traditional healthcare, like the kind that his company provides, is only 10%, I think, of true quality of life healthcare. The 90% is family and environment and animals and nature and community and church and all these other things, instant marriage.
Yep, I think there's a very holistic approach to health that perhaps is viewed a little bit differently in this country than in other countries. And if I'm saying it correctly, the World Health Organization definition of health is not merely the absence of disease, but social, physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being. I mean, not saying that perfectly, but it goes well beyond being physically healthy.
And then there's pugs.
Yes, pugs. We were having we had a little bit of a conversation yesterday.
Were we drinking?
I think we had a glass. I think some wine was involved. But in all seriousness, we were talking about the role of pets and animals as one of the issues that came up was really around loneliness and people experiencing that. And I have a friend who loves pugs, and we had a really wonderful conversation about how they can be the ideal pet for someone who maybe isn't very mobile and doesn't get out very much. They don't like to move. They love to sleep. You can train them to use a litter box, and they're just, they can be a wonderful companion for folks that, maybe are a little bit isolated and, don't have a huge social network. They're the perfect little lap dog. And, I'm not necessarily promoting just the pug, but, pets really do have an important role in people's lives.
And plus, if they don't work out, they fit very nicely on the barbecue.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would try barbecued pug, but...
All right, Amber Slichta, thank you very much from the Wilson Foundation. I wish you all the best luck spending that huge pile of wow.
Thank you, Brant.
And how much was it again?
About $1.2 billion plus interest.
Woo! All right, go back to work.
Okay, thank you.
It's with great pleasure that I introduce my next guest, Dr. B.J. Miller, Jr. There are so many things about BJ to tell you, but let's just start by saying he is a hospice and palliative care specialist who treats hospitalized patients with terminal or life-altering illness at the University of California, San Francisco Medical Center. That alone makes him a hero in my book. While his academic and medical credentials include Princeton, where he did undergrad work on art history, more on that later, and a fellowship in hospice and palliative medicine at Harvard, it's really his work integrating spirituality with the health of mind and body into medical education that really has me jazzed. So if by chance you are or you know somebody who is trying to figure out who they should be in life, BJ is a great example of you never know how all the pieces are going to fit together. After an accident as a young man took 3 of his 4 limbs, it was insights gleaned from classical art that helped him start to make sense of what had happened to him. So in this one man, you have this beautiful blend of very practical medical training, life-changing and deeply personal experiences with the dying, an eye for and appreciation of beauty and art, and a growing, ever-changing awareness of the spiritual and its power to heal. Now, BJ has become an inspiration to millions, and not just because of where he's been, but also because of how he thinks about his future, the present moment, about life and death, about his body and how things change, and about the importance of beauty in our lives and culture. I know even this short conversation with BJ will leave you inspired, hopeful, and energized. It certainly did me. Please join me in welcoming Dr. BJ Miller. I am here at CTAC in November of 2017 with one of my heroes, BJ Miller. Hi, BJ.
Hello, Brian.
Very good. Good to see you. And I have to say that one of the reasons that I am such a huge fan is, of course, because of the fine work you did with Zen Hospice that I've been following over the years. And there is a quote that I believe came from your TED Talk, which is that, "Let death be what takes us, not a lack of imagination." That was from your TED Talk, yes?
Yes, that is. Yeah, I love that line too. I'm proud of that one. Yeah.
Absolutely a favorite. So we're going to let our imaginations run a little bit wild here today, okay?
Sounds good.
Now, of course, you are somewhat known for the accident that happened so many years ago.
Yeah, that's for sure true. Can't write it.
Right. But now I want to fast forward to today, and I want to say you've got this vast body of amazing work that you've been doing with Zen Hospice and elsewhere. And I want to ask you that if you were to write your own tombstone, what would be on it that is obviously not the accident, but you've got so many other things to pull from? What would you want to be known for?
You know, I've actually thought about this question before. Someone posed it to me and I really didn't have a good answer. So where my mind went was just a very simple thing, like, name and all that stuff. And then just said, he cared, he tried. Those are the two things I really am proud of and would ever want to be remembered as. Yeah.
And when you say he cared, he tried, is that just for life in general, relationships, or would it be for your specific vocation? All of the above?
All of the above. All of the above. I mean, the work that I do is all, and I think palliative care in general, and in my mind, health care in general, is all on behalf of something larger, which is the human experience and applying the self as part of some whole, as some larger whole. So, all of the above. I don't draw a big distinction between my work and my personal life. They're very entwined.
It's a beautiful thing when your life and your play, your life and your personal and your professional just kind of melt together.
Oh, it's such a treat. And it's one of the reasons I'm very proud to have chosen palliative care. There was some strategy there that whatever I might be learning from my patients, which is immense, and their families, I would then be using in my own life. There's like a sweet efficiency in this work where you by doing this work, you improve your own life and vice versa. So there's a sweet little reciprocal wheel that opens up.
All right. So we're going to roll with the imagination thing a little bit more. Your quote.
Okay. Sounds good.
And, we're going to go crazy here. So, imagine you are a fiction writer. So maybe a science fiction writer, and you're describing some, utopian world in the future where some of the immense challenges that we're facing with caregiving and the age wave have been solved. You can go wild on this. How would they be solved? Just top of mind, the craziest ideas you could come up with.
Well, okay, huge question, huge, beautiful question. I mean, for one, I think we would be, well, I just mentioned this idea of efficiency. Like, I believe there's so much inherent, innate wisdom in us as individuals, as people, as cultures, that goes relatively unused these days in particular. I say these days in particular because we're moving so fast. We're all seduced by innovation and that there's something new awaiting us. Well, I think for us now, the mode really is integration and using what we actually already know and having the confidence to rely on ourselves as a people more than we do. So I think part of this utopian future would simply be making good on all that we already have among us, what's already innate to us, and having the confidence to believe in that. So that would be a huge piece of it. I think humans are very good at caring for humans. I think that's what we do. We're social animals, but we get in the way of that. This is the sort of the lack of the imagination is we kind of get in our own way. So one huge piece would be just really drawing on ourselves in a new and deeper and better way, and that we would care for each other. We don't need some external expert to tell us what to do so often. So that'd be a huge piece of it. The second piece would be, I love thinking about the infrastructure. So, architecture, the built environment, everything that we create, we would somehow reawaken in ourselves the urge to craft, to take pride in whatever we built, rather than this sort of disposable thinking. So this utopian world would be incredibly beautifully designed. And by beautifully designed, that's very subjective, but it would somehow draw you in. It would be a world you'd want to participate in. It would be a building you'd want to be in. Everything would have a symbiotic effect. So the built environment would be a huge piece of this utopia. And I would love to work with architects and others who are ostensibly far afield from healthcare and palliative care and bring them in, because if we're serious about quality of life and well-being, well, medicine doesn't have a lock on that stuff. So those are two pieces of this utopian puzzle. But I think a third piece may be, and it's related, I think we're somehow always seem to trying to transcend our bodies in some way. And there's a brilliant urge in there. And we aren't just our bodies. But sort of building off that second point, the built environment of us, the material of us, I love that I have a body as flawed as it is that allows me to feel things and touch things and smell things and hear things. The immediacy of the aesthetic domain to me is relatively untapped, except as a sales pitch, as a marketing ploy to pull you into something that you don't need or whatever else, or beauty is relegated to a museum. I think that should be the aesthetic domain. While we have a body, we should delight in it, not belittle it to try to transcend it, actually delight in it and work with it. So this utopian would be a very sensuous place as well.
Easy for you to say. You still have all your hair.
Yeah, well, it's plenty gray. I may have hair, but it's gray and dry and brittle and falling out.
Okay, but no Rosie the robot? I mean, I come from the tech background, and last week I was out at Aging 2.0, where there's a lot of innovations coming from the tech world. Last night you referred to loneliness and depression as a scourge, which I think it is. It may very well be the number one ailment of older people. And one of the ways that technical people are addressing this is with artificial intelligence companions and things like that. What are your thoughts on that versus the solution that you kind of hinted at last night, which is kind of learn to find joy being alone and learn to see the suffering of loneliness as a teacher. So how would you balance those two things, that kind of innate human need for companionship versus the opportunity to grow in wisdom without it?
So great question. So, because I believe in the analog world and the world of flesh and all our quote unquote flaws and don't want to necessarily get beyond them, I love them. But that doesn't mean I also want to be limited by them. So, my body is, and most of us are an example of this. We are all interfacing with machines. I mean, where our bodies end and machines pick up is becoming an increasingly vague line. And I'm all for it. I mean, there's nothing in me that's a Luddite. And just because I'm interested in being true about the fact that we die doesn't mean that I'm not interested in living as long as I can.
Right. And that would be true because you've actually got machines attached to your legs.
So I love my prosthetic legs. I'm not confined to prostheses. I love them. They are my legs. They get me around the planet, and I think they can be beautiful and they can be extremely functional. And we may be at a time where you could imagine, we could imagine that we could design prosthetic body parts that could actually be superior to the ones that we would have gotten by birth. So this idea that, it sort of upends the idea of disability, like as something that we're necessarily less than. Disability opens up to a whole, adaptive, creative mindset. And interfacing with machines and our own inventions in novel ways is thrilling to me. I think the key with anything artificial, of course, is that we use our inventions, that they don't use us, that we make sure that whatever we create continues to serve humanity and the lived experience. So there's some cautions in technology for sure. I don't want to overlean on the built world, the tech world, the innovation world to solve all our problems and make us perfect. I'm not interested in perfection. But I am interested in delighting in the world. And one of the ways we get to delight in it is the things we create. We are innovative creatures, and I definitely don't want to get in the way of that impulse.
I'm just ready to have a dog instead of, a robot right now. Okay. Last question. There seems to be this, fusion, a blurring of the lines between aging, the natural decay that comes with aging. Things fall apart, your hair falls out. In my case, not yours. I don't think so, BJ. And how do you feel about that? How do you feel about kind of this blurring of not keeping the natural process of aging and dying as something distinctly beautiful, as opposed to illness, which is something gone wrong? Well, did you notice that, and how did it make you feel?
Well, I notice it all the time as a disabled person. I mean, our language is all flawed. Any illness, disability, etc., all implies it's an aberrancy, it's less than, it's a loss, it's all loss, and suffering itself. If palliative care has a target, it is suffering. And this is where I think it's really key to tease out necessary suffering from unnecessary suffering. The unnecessary suffering, the way we isolate ourselves from each other, the way we shame each other implicitly or explicitly, the way we build a world that doesn't include everybody, all these things, these are the ways these are unnecessary sufferings. Our healthcare system, which actually can be a source of suffering, all these things, these are creations that end up hurting. That's a big problem, and we should really be serious about not creating new ways of suffering. Now, that said, we shouldn't overly orphan suffering. I have learned much more from my losses than I have from my gains. And so this sort of linear, rhetorical mindset of it's either good or bad, it's either a loss or a gain, we gotta find a new language. It doesn't do the subject justice. You could look at me and see an imperfect body. I do not see that anymore. My body is what it is, and I love it. That's taken me years to get there. And all that I've learned from my losses, they're no longer really losses. They end up being gains. So it's a really interesting and dynamic mix. And our language is what kind of doesn't do it service. If we let each other do our thing, we all play this out one way or another if we let ourselves. So, I think most of what you're pointing to is a rhetorical and conceptual problem. Actually, all the time, losses and gains are completely entwined with each other.
The obstacle is the way.
Yeah. So far, that's the way my life has played out. Yeah, absolutely. Now, let's take our breaks when we get them. We don't need to create problems for ourselves. There are plenty natural ones to deal with.
BJ, thank you so much. It's an immense pleasure.
Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you again for joining me on this 3-part series from the 2017 annual convention of the Coalition to Transform Advanced Care. I think you'll agree there are some amazing, inspiring, brilliant people working hard and stepping up to the challenges of the aged. Thanks to all of them for joining me on the show and sharing some of their wisdom with us. Coming up, we dive even deeper into the challenges of caregiving and speak with a boomer who held the hand of his aged mother for over a year until she passed. In the process, he experienced all the emotional and practical challenges that go with that noble calling. If you've done it, you understand. If you haven't, you probably will. So be sure to watch for my next show. Until then, my beloved, make the best of every moment because it's the only moment you have, and keep all those digital cards and letters coming via my Facebook page, Twitter, or best of all, via a positive review on iTunes. Yep, that'll do it. Until next time, this is your host, Brant Huddleston, signing off.